Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Applied Privacy Podcast, where I invite privacy pros from both industry and academia to come and share their thoughts with me on the privacy landscape from an engineering and research point of view. This series is called Applied Privacy because there is an imminent need for privacy products to be built to safeguard the interests of customers, clients, and business alike. While the governments of nations have been doing their part in legislating privacy, I believe it is our job to take the baton and engineer solutions to build privacy into the products and services we offer. And today, I have a very special guest from academia, all the way from Barcelona, Professor Tawfiq Alashoor. Hello, Tawfiq. Thanks for coming here.
Hi, Evan. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm really glad that you're here with me. And could you tell me a bit about your background, your, academically speaking and professionally, that what led you to privacy research?
Sure. Well, I started in 2000, technically 13. That's when I started doing fundamental privacy research. And so it's been more than 10 years in fundamental privacy research, empirical, theoretical. But I also did do some practical, let's say, applications, software development. I did back in the days when I was very young, high school and before high school, and also right after college. So that technical experience combined with the theoretical and empirical, experimental or evidence-based solutions, having both the evidence and the solution gave me kind of a great perspective on privacy, information privacy in general, and the potential for solutions in the future, particularly like you started with, that now we have um, regulations. Now today more than 150 countries have their own privacy regulations, so we see a top-down approach, but the bottom-up approach is still struggling, where individuals are not yet aware of a lot of the solutions that exist in the current market. Plus, they don't understand the dynamics and what's happening with their data when they're using apps and websites. So I'm excited to talk about this today with you, Alvin. Thank you.
Well, definitely, as you mentioned, the top-down versus the bottom-up approach. Top-down where the government are, forming legislations and form laws, and bottom-up, the individual talking about privacy, being concerned about privacy. So actually, that brings me to the privacy paradox. You know, this term called the privacy paradox suggests that people are concerned about their privacy. However, they often share personal information online. Could you tell me and the audience more about this privacy paradox, and what are the key drivers behind this paradox?
Sure. From a historical point of view, this concept started popping with some evidence early in the 2000s, like 2001. The term was mentioned, I think, in the mid 90s, somewhere in one of the papers. I don't remember the author's name, but we are still struggling with that problem. You see, after 20, 25 years, we see this problem manifesting in many different contexts. And everyone relates to that, because let's take a simple example. I did a study, one of the first studies on the privacy paradox when I was a PhD student, where we asked subjects whether they were about to share something on Facebook, but then they backed down. They decided not to share that thing. And what are the reasons they did that? the retracting that decision back. They were about to post something, but then they decided not to. All the subjects we asked was a qualitative study, so we had about 20 or 25 people. All of them, they said yes, or at least 95% said yes. They had that moment. That is the paradox when it's solved right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a paradox. In that moment, humans are doing something called privacy calculus, where they're weighing the cost, the potential costs, and the potential benefits of that privacy decision, in which they reveal themselves through information. That calculus took about a few seconds in most cases, sometimes minutes. If you're thinking about sharing something with the public, you might take a few seconds, a few minutes, and then make a final decision. The fact that people actually still remember that happened to them is evidence that shows that the paradox can be resolved. And so there is the solution, we can see it. And where is the solution? The issue is it's humans themselves. They have to practice that calculus in a very practical way so that they can maximize the potential utility function, or let's say the benefits, the future benefits. What they're looking for is some, let's say, socializing reactions, response in some way, attention, if we use a social media related term. So that's the benefit of revealing the selves or the self to others. But we know there are costs, that this information or this revealed self could be misused by other individuals, by organizations, companies, and even governments. So in a way, that is the paradox from an individual point of view. So the paradox is an individual, a phenomenon that is at the individual level. It happens among individuals. But it has implications at the individual level, where individuals sometimes get harassed or get some sort of negative utility in the future. But it also has implications at the organizational level, at the governmental level, where the awareness of making proper and optimal, let's say, or at least suboptimal privacy decisions in the society, in the entire country, is in a way problematic. If it's so problematic at the individual level, it'd be so hard to fix this problem in a top-down approach. In a way, let's use cookie banners as an example. Now you go to any website, you find these cookie banners, but most people don't even have the time to look at what these choices are. In the past, it was much more difficult in the past. We have improved, and that's what the regulation has done so far. We see these cookie banners all the time, but people are not yet interested in what these choices are, or what are they for, how they can benefit them. This is the time where individuals need to learn that these choices that you are making today are going to help evaluate or estimate the value of your personal data in the future. Because privacy and personal data will be the currency of the future. We see the pattern happening. It's already happening, but then it will be more tangible in the future. So that's kind of my view on the privacy paradox.
You did mention about, the paradox is actually at a very, very granular level, is because of the users, the human beings at the very end. So there has to be a bottom-up approach. But personally, I think that anything that is good cannot be really forced, right? So privacy, I don't think can be forced. It has to be inspired. And unfortunately, major events such as Cambridge Analytica will make people realize, you know what, maybe we should take privacy more seriously. But do you see any other ways where scandal-free ways, let's call it, where people could be incentivized to understand this privacy paradox and take their privacy more seriously? As you mentioned, that it will be a future currency eventually. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Sure, that's a very interesting question and right to the point. From a scientific point of view, almost every privacy paper that I've read and every privacy study that I've conducted would show a significant association between perceived benefits and disclosure behavior. Meaning that if people perceive the benefits, they will share their information. Right? So they understand the benefits of sharing personal information. When it comes to the cost of privacy, we still see evidence, strong evidence, that when people perceive the cost of sharing personal information, they would decide not to share. But this link along with privacy concerns and the association between privacy concerns and disclosure behavior, we see fluctuations in there. But we don't see as much when it comes to the benefits, the association or even the cause of perceived benefits on sharing behavior is solid all the time. This tells us that there is somewhat misestimation or an estimation of the risks of privacy among individuals. There's some misunderstanding in there. People don't yet understand these risks for different reasons. So we could see in some of the studies already show that when we look at whether perceived risks influence disclosure behavior, this might be influenced by their mood, for instance. When they're in a happy mood or in a positive emotional state, this link does not hold anymore.
Yeah.
So in that way, people don't yet understand these nuanced effects on their privacy decisions, even if they hold true, let's say true is a big word, let's say true privacy concerns, and they see the risks. There are times that they will actually not act on those concerns or believed risks or subjective perceived risks, even if that risk was so actual and you can see it. So going back to your question, one way to solve it is to improve this awareness around privacy decisions among individuals. And that could happen through education, through employers. Now we see a strong pattern where companies, businesses, organizations are now obliged to provide awareness programs. But we are not yet there where these privacy, or let's say cybersecurity, they're not called privacy, not yet. They're called cybersecurity or security education training and awareness programs, SETA or CETA programs, or cybersecurity awareness programs. But these programs teach individuals about phishing and some password strategies, very security oriented, very much. But what people know is to understand the privacy orientation of that equation, because a cybersecurity threat starts from a privacy decision. And if we think about social engineering, I was reading a paper that is not published yet, but it's a phenomenal study. It shows that if you bring 3 people, you need only one. If you bring 3 people who have zero technical knowledge in security and hacking, and you give them some instructions that are very easy to follow, in a matter of a month or so, they can bring you their bank account information. They would bring you that person's family history, medical history, all basic demographic data. With just very easy instructions, go look up this website, which is a very well-known website, and they would actually send data subject request. This is a GDPR principle, right? The right to access. Now, as individuals need to access their data, so how do they do that? They go contact their companies. I want to get access to my data. What do these companies require from this requester? Basic information. So anyone can go and do that. This is a problematic gap and or error in that fundamental law. This paper is under review, but if you go to the literature, we already have this evidence several years ago. So there are gaps even with these strong regulations, but what we need to do now is to educate individuals that, look, now it's so easy to access your data, and that your privacy decisions are easily influenced by so many factors. Just like we learned how to secure our driving behavior, for instance, putting the seat belt all the time. Now it's very, very common, and you would be surprised if someone is not putting their seat belt. So we are there to learn these basic privacy safeguards. So in my opinion, that's the solution moving forward, is to push on the bottom-up approach to address these privacy issues today.
So that's very interesting. And so you did mention that organizations have a fundamental responsibility to actually educate their employees, and who would eventually be trained, and this can branch out of the organization into their personal lives as well. That's amazing. So I guess my next question is, like, how can organizations and policymakers within the organizations address this privacy paradox to better protect individuals' data while respecting their choices? It's difficult to do that, isn't it?
Yes, it is, of course, and it would take some time to fix this problem. I'll tell you why. Cultures don't change fast, right? If we
Yeah.
want to change a culture, we need several years. So one of the first things that could actually be done is to study the culture of privacy, or privacy culture within the organizational boundaries. You need to learn and know about privacy culture in your organizations. Are your employees falling prey to the paradox all the time? Are they contradictory when they make privacy decisions, when they share with one client for some reasons, but then they share that same, or they don't same that same data with another client, even though the other client provided the same requirements? So and that could be done. Actually, we have done this with several companies in Brazil, and this is with Palki, Sabrina, and Andre. We did a project in the past 2 years where we studied privacy culture at organizations. And you could see some some numbers would actually surprise you. Why would an employee act in that way? This could be only one, sometimes two, sometimes 10, depending on the sample size. So if we collected data from, let's say, 800 employees, we would still see 40, 30 people telling you, I'm going to share this personal data with a third party if the third party asked for that data. Right away, they would share it without following the appropriate procedure. Well, even though that sometimes is one person in the organization that is misbehaving in terms of privacy decisions or organizational privacy practices, you only need one person to get that piece of information. Sometimes if it's a password, that's all what you need to hack into an entire enterprise system.
Yeah.
But regardless, if we go back to privacy culture now, if we found a few people here and there, and then when we did the national level study, we can see there is so many people. There's like hundreds of people that are doing things that need to be fixed. And this is why a lot of the participating companies were so happy with the outcome. So you can create a feedback loop where you get insights about your employees and how they're behaving, and then you can feed them that tailored program that can fix those components in their privacy calculus, let's call it that. Now we can easily link privacy theory to privacy practice today. So that is once you study that culture, now you can keep improving that privacy culture, and then you can see that the whole organization is following proper and solid privacy process or procedure across the different functions. And if you do that across different organizations, by default, you are improving the society's privacy awareness, right? So now the society is aware of privacy decisions because most companies are providing robust privacy programs to their employees, and they're trying to create that feedback loop and enhance organizational privacy practices, because the employees are actually the majority of a population, right? And then education from elementary school, intermediate, secondary school, injecting those courses will help improve the status quo in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely. I see future where in computer science courses and cybersecurity courses there will be a module called privacy engineering, and I don't think it's maybe in a few years, probably next year. Also, it is very much possible because there are companies who are actually teaching privacy engineering to them, and a few of the companies, which unfortunately I can't name for privacy reasons, they have actually rolled out these courses to their employees and to the rest of the world as well, thereby leading the charge, and which I think is an amazing way of leading the industry by example. So that's amazing. So touching on top of that, like I'm very interested in the new and emerging technologies like large language models in AI, natural language processing, and specifically privacy enhancing technologies or PETs. So, what role do you think these emerging technologies like AI, PETs play in either exacerbating or resolving the privacy paradox?
That's a very interesting question. I will tell you a little bit about an experiment we did in regard
Brilliant.
to that. Let's say large language models or a robot. You can imagine a humanoid robot called Coco. Coco is so cute. He is tiny, but Coco helps you with housekeeping, carrying a nice conversation with you. It's an advanced, we can consider it advanced model, not just a language model. It also has some emotional capabilities. cognitive capabilities beyond those in the existing large language models. Now imagine Coco when they intruded your privacy. You were in the bathroom and then Coco entered the bathroom. Well, how unethical is that from 1 to 5? We asked.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
What is your answer?
I think that if my humanoid Coco is going to invade my privacy, especially when I'm in the bathroom, that cheeky little LLM, I would say 5. This thing violated my privacy, intruded it.
Cool. We asked I believe more than 1,500 people or even more. We asked them that same exact question. And some would say 5, of course. Some would say 1. Some would say 3. That's not the interesting question yet. The interesting question is, now imagine another robot called Warden. Warden is harsh. He's very assertive. He commands. The agency of that robot, in short, is much higher than the agency of Coco. Now, what if Warden intruded your privacy and entered the bathroom? How unethical is that from 1 to 5? If you chose 5, you would want to search for, I believe, 10 in this case. And that is exactly what we found. When people were presented with the scenario of Coco, they were less concerned from an ethical privacy point of view. They would say this is a cute robot, but when it was Warden, we could see a significant difference in how people evaluated the unethicality of that privacy intrusion. And this is done by advanced machines that we will see all the time in the near future. So going to your question, how would it resolve or exacerbate? How would these large language models and the robotic age resolve or exacerbate some of the existing problems in our privacy practices? Is actually a difficult question. What I can tell you is what we found in our experiments. And I think, though, these fundamental empirical studies that tell us how people perceive privacy in general and in specific domains, in different contexts, different time, those studies would be so invaluable to future privacy solutions. So that's where we can understand how humans respond to privacy. Let's call them interactions, like human-computer interaction. But these interactions that we're talking about are fundamentally privacy ones. So how to address them? We would need so much personalization, not in the current way, or at least in the past 20 years, where personalization is only understood from the point of advertisement. These, you go to a website searching for a cookie, you see cookies all the time across different websites. That is a form of personalization. It succeeded for several years, but now we see the cost of these companies incurring because they violated the law in many different ways. So we see them fined by the regulators. Well, this is all happening, and if we think about it, right? So we pay. Well, we use a product, we use an app, and we provide our data to that app. Sometimes we pay for these apps. Now you have to go and buy an add-on or another service that actually helps you get that data back. Well, where is this? So the money is flowing at the organizational level, regulators, and then individuals are just pushing the flow of that currency upward to the organizational level, and then you see the economy moving at that level. What we would see in the future is a bidirectional flow of that resource, a currency, money, or whatever it is, but it is the means of exchange. We will see more of a bidirectional flow where individuals not only giving their data and then struggling, then find another company to actually delete that data, but then there will be participants of that ecosystem. And but they won't be able to do that if they don't even know about privacy decisions and how important and critical every privacy decision they make. So when today people don't even consider going through a cookie banner to see what are the companies or data brokers or third parties marketing cookies or essential functionality cookies. If they don't even know this, that's a problem. If we think about cookie banners, if we take the last 2 years only, almost every individual faced these cookies, and every day they face them so many times when they go to websites. But if they still don't know what that is, then we failed in conveying the point. The solution is there, but people are not using the solution.
Yeah.
Companies are using the solutions to comply with the law, but individuals are not using the solution. We need to educate individuals to use these solutions, to actually take them as they are a serious process in the digital world. So I think that is what in my mind when it comes to advanced technologies, emerging technologies, and whether they will improve the status quo or not. It will depend highly on educating individuals. We need to educate individuals about their privacy decisions.
I love the way you said it, because this is my concern. Because if you think about these cookie banners, they are not really innovative. It's more like they're very clever ways to not get fined by the authorities, right? So these are not really innovations, and companies also know, like, if I'm being bombarded with these accept all cookies, or accept partial cookies, I really want to get to the content. I really don't care, because if I'm in a hurry and the first thing that I have to do is accept all cookies, I won't even bother to read. And what companies are doing is that companies are getting a legal way to collect the data or to access the data, but that's not really innovation, is it? So I think that most companies see privacy as a roadblock to innovation, and in some ways it is. It's hard to deny that. So how can companies strike a balance between data-driven innovation and respecting individuals' privacy rights, but actually innovating rather than being clever and just add extra layers of legalities?
Well, that's the tension in scholarly work, in industry. Both are trying to kind of target that equilibrium, right? Using data in a fair manner that helps organizations and individuals without compromising their personal life. If we think about the tech industry, I would make my answer very short to this question. If we think about the tech industry, in the past 20 years. Privacy was not even there. But
Yeah,
there
I
were
agree.
a lot of innovations. We built a social media world, and now we're kind of carrying on to reach to an AI, tangible AI world before we reach to artificial general intelligence, AGI world. If one would argue against privacy as a barrier or an inhibitor of innovation, I would argue that privacy is innovations today, because all the innovations now, or not all, but many of the innovations in the tech industry are driven by privacy as a concept, as law. For example, if we think about these cookie banners, it's an innovative solution to address fundamental privacy problem, the right to privacy, right? People have to give consent, just like humans have to understand how to apply consent when they communicate with other humans. I cannot take your hat without your consent, right? I could just say, well, I just wanted to look at it and give it back to you. That's what is happening in the privacy domain, right? If third parties, they're getting, or companies in general are exchanging your data, but then you were not even given a chance to give consent in the past 20 years. It only happened in the past few years. So these are innovative or innovations in the tech industry that only emerged because of privacy. So even if it's an inhibitor for some time, or even if this is how some people see privacy as an inhibitor, but it provided a big room for innovations in the tech industry. And the privacy enhancing technologies is just in the nascent stage now. We will see more and more innovative, creative, practical solutions to address problems that we have been running protests. If you go Google privacy, you will see a lot of pictures by people protesting for privacy. Well, now these cookie banners are like some nuanced components to address that big concept or human right. Therefore, we will continue to see more solutions, even if they are interrupting or disrupting the current processes. We will be so thankful in the future when AI takes over. At least now we know that the data is flowing this way as compared to the past 2 decades. We didn't even know where the data was flowing across different systems.
Yeah. Totally agree. I guess right now we are way more, educated. We're way more self-aware about the information flow, our right to the privacy. And you did mention that privacy enhanced technologies or pets are are at very nascent stage of their life cycle. So I'm very curious. According to you personally, which privacy enhancing technologies or strategies do you believe hold promise for fostering innovation while preserving privacy when you build a product? Do you have any personal favorite pets, maybe?
There is so many of them. I cannot put one over the other, but I think those that are addressing the anonymization problem will excel, because this is the fundamental problem, to anonymize data, like to de-identify a data set is not an easy algorithm. But
Oh,
there's
definitely.
many of them are working toward addressing that problem. If we think about um, differential privacy. One of them, I believe, given the use of big data sets across different servers and clients, federated learning, uh, another solution that could address these problems. But that is still not easy, even if we find very
Oh.
creative ways to go around the data. Because you can always reverse engineer things. And when you're able
Mhm.
to reverse engineer, then we're back to square one.
Oh
But
yeah, definitely.
hopefully the future, we see emerging technologies that are targeting this problem, and we can only hope for the best, right? So we work toward addressing that problem in the best way we can until we reach to an optimal point.
Yeah, I just want to add that I sympathize with legacy systems and companies that whose code bases were built in the 90s and early 2000s, and even up to 2000, like mid 2000s. When I say mid 2000, mid 2010s. Because back then privacy wasn't a huge thing. Now they have their own, the entire company being built, and all of a sudden they have to comply with privacy laws, and it's very difficult to enhance to embed privacy code, privacy as code, let's say, into their development process. I truly sympathize with that. But let's say brand new companies are coming up, startups coming up. So, what should such organizations consider when designing privacy preserving systems to ensure that they don't really hinder progress or development? So, I'm specifically talking about either a new product being rolled out by a huge corporation or maybe new startups. So, just building a privacy layer, if you will. What do you think? These organizations should do.
Okay, that is an important question because privacy should be involved from planning to implementation and maintenance. If we
Totally.
think about software development, we plan a project, and we set the requirements vaguely when we are planning that project. We set the estimate for the budget estimate, financial budget for the project. We set a feasibility, or we work on a feasibility study to see if this system is going to be built successfully. When we think about that vague planning, privacy should start from there. And when we say privacy in this case, we're talking about the data. What kind of data are we collecting? Are these data sensitive? What is the nature? Do classification from your business development uh, brainstorming stage. When you think that way, now you can actually build a privacy solution, or a fundamentally privacy business or program. Because if we think about the data and where it will flow and the classification of the data, we can actually do excellent risk assessment when the system is already built in the future, right? Because in a risk assessment
Totally.
for a privacy program, you want to know the value of your data. It's so hard now to quantify the data that we have because we have done zero work building these systems. Now we are at the stage of, well, we need to know currency. What's the value? What's the quantification of this data set that we have? So if we think about privacy from that regard, or software development with a privacy, um, let's say with privacy by default, right? From planning, and then in the analysis, when we get to the requirements of the system, now we will know even more about our estimates of the value of the data that we will either acquire, collect, use, share, etc. And then you get to the design, implementation. Those are typical processes that we already know them. So if we start with privacy from planning and analysis, I think we would end up with amazing systems in the future.
I agree, because there is a term called shifting privacy left. So in the life
Yeah.
cycle of developing, shift instead of privacy being the afterthought, shift privacy left when you're actually planning it. And I think amazing way of putting it. Yeah, totally.
This is
I get, yeah,
just to add to that. I also try to put this fact up there, which is privacy and security have always been in the tail of courses, programs, right? When you learn
yeah.
computer science, privacy is like chapter number 15, where you may not even cover it. So it's an education problem, it's a practical problem, but I think altogether in academia and also in the industry, we see this shift that you just mentioned, which is a great move.
Yeah, it's more often than not that very simple tasks can we take it very lightly. I truly agree. Like ethics and legalities, engineers don't bother. They don't want to care about it, and who can blame them? Because it's not adventurous enough for engineers to even look at that. We want to code, man, and all of a sudden you're coming and telling me we should take care of legalities. So I get that there is a disconnect, and but if we were to, instead of making that chapter 15, if on chapter 1 we could say that you should have a mindset to build systems with privacy, while spearheading with privacy. I think that would be a better way of building better, more innovative solutions. And hey, it's not easy, but that's what the industry demands, and that's what a morally perfectly fine person would do. And I totally agree with that. I guess I need to know, you mentioned a term called privacy calculus. I'm not really sure if I'm very comfortable with that term. So if you could illuminate me more on that, what is privacy calculus? If you could.
Yeah, sure. Um, it's very simple. Let's take an example. If one day I am sharing, or I'm thinking, intending, right? Intention to share or willingness to share. Sometimes if you're being asked by someone else to share your personal data. If one day I'm intending to share something on Instagram, I saw a nice scene, took a picture of it. Whether or not there are humans in that picture, that's another question. But now I have a picture that represents my preference in that moment, that I actually like that scene. I took a picture, and then now I share it on Instagram, share it with friends, share it with the social media website, that, hey, I, in a way, like this picture. Maybe I don't like it if it's something negative, and then I comment in there, but at least this picture got my attention, and I'm giving you my attention now. Making that decision to share something you like or dislike is not made without a calculus. There is a calculus that happens before you make that decision. It is the time between when you thought about sharing it until you actually did it. That is the time for that privacy calculus. What happens in that time? Your brain is running a risk-benefit equation. Very simple. Are there going to be benefits out of sharing that picture? And are there going to be risks? Most likely, if you like that scene so much, you like the picture, the benefits would outweigh the risks. The risks are minimal. And the risk, if it happens, it will happen far in the future. whereas you will get the benefit immediately by making that decision and sharing that information. So the calculus also has this different level of time: current time versus future, immediate gratification versus long-term effect. So although that calculus is so simple, you're just thinking about, is this going to be good or bad for me to share that picture? That is the calculus. But if we get to the nuance calculus, there are different calculi, right? There is a general calculus that in general, as a person, you respect, you appreciate, you value your privacy more than others. So you, in general, you may tend to have a very strict calculus or a very lenient, loose calculus. And then, but that general calculus is influencing also the specific domain calculus when you make that specific decision to share on Instagram. Now, that specific calculus is the important one. Most of the problems happen in that specific domain calculus. So in general, I hope I conveyed the point of the privacy calculus, where it is a simple equation to calculate the risks and the benefits to decide to share some personal information or to protect. So if you decided not to share, that basically means the risks outweighed the benefits. Maybe there were some individuals in that picture and you thought, well, it's not nice I should respect others' privacy in this case and not share something publicly with my friends and to the public, because those people did not give me consent to share their data. And now today, GDPR gives individuals the right to claim their privacy if for instance you see a picture of yourself shared publicly without your knowledge. You can actually put a case in there and defend yourself, and the law would absolutely protect you as an individual. And there are cases, well-known cases like that, small cases in the privacy law. So that calculus is what helps us make privacy decisions every day. This is how we interact. If a stranger asked you on the street, how old are you? You would do a quick calculus and you may or may not answer. If you did not answer, that means the perceived risk of sharing your age with that stranger were more than the perceived benefits of maybe having a nice conversation, right? So that's the expected benefit. Someone is asking, maybe they're curious or they want to help you. And that same calculus is happening when we go to a website, a cookie banner. The calculus is so quick. When we accept all, that means we don't necessarily see the risk or the benefit, but it is for sure a positive calculus, because it has to be positive to accept all.
Yeah.
Because if otherwise it will be neutral and then you would exit the website. If it's neutral, you decide not to actually go to that website. If it's negative, you reject all of them. So that is the privacy calculus with some examples.
So I think the way you explain it, that privacy calculus is a function of time and culture as well. So for example, let's say someone goes out and tweets something which might be culturally appropriate today, but 10 years down the line, it might be culturally inappropriate. And so if a person tweets something that is fine today, the risk to reward ratio is quite low. So there is more reward. Maybe they will get a lot of likes on Twitter, formerly, well, now known as X. But 10 years down the line, the culture may have shifted, and the same tweet or post might be very offensive. And then the culture, it sounds like privacy calculus is not a constant. It shifts, it changes its value with respect to time and culture, which it's very difficult to measure, right?
I think this will get me to talk about the general relativity of privacy, since you mentioned culture and time, but I'll use another term for culture, which is context. The privacy calculus is not a function of culture and time. The privacy calculus is a function of risk and benefit. That's it. Simple as
Okay.
that. Time and culture and anything else is something that could influence the calculus, that could moderate the calculus and the resulting outcome. But you were right. Time and culture, context. If we put context, we use a broader term than culture. This is a paper we have been working on. As a matter of fact, last night I just finished the final draft, so can't wait for this paper to be out. We call it the digital zombie phenomenon. If we posted something on Facebook, let's say 15 years ago, and we look at it today, that's 10, if 10 years is more than enough. And if we look at it today and we don't like it anymore, now the calculus has changed. Now it's not a constant, yes. Now, because it's dynamic. So time, you have time and you have context. You as a person has changed, plus the norms, social norms may have changed. Regulations have changed, right? You could have posted something 15 years ago that was completely acceptable socially and was in line with the regulations. Today, if you look at it, given that what we have in the privacy domain, it might not comply with the law anymore. You might be violating someone's privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can see this shift in the value of personal data, right? So this is what we were talking about, as quantifying personal data is so difficult. However, if we can do perfect context time measurement or an instrument that can help us quantify that picture that you posted 15 years ago. But to quantify that data, we would need to know more about the context. The time we can go, we have already something we call a digital grave, right? If you look at your Instagram or Facebook, you keep pushing down personal data all the way down. So it's like you have a grave composed of your personal data. So we have that timeline. The technology was perfect in keeping this timeline for us. But context, that is the problem. It didn't do much with context. We can now with large language models and algorithms, we can estimate the context of this personal information that we've shared in the past. But it will be difficult. But what we have is years of life, right? So we only had 20 years in this digital world that we can actually say that, yes, we did live in a digital world, the past 20 years. Now we have maybe 100 years, thousands of years until something else takes over, like AI. But we don't know when that will be. So we have now the opportunity to actually work on this fundamental equation to help us quantify personal data that we share today. And so going back to your question, the privacy calculus, and when we added culture, now culture is part of context. So if we are able to manage that equation and build an instrument that helps us quantify that variability in that big calculus, then we are set. And this is akin to, if I use space-time, Einstein's work, right? The first instrument was very, very basic. I'm not a physicist, but I understand this vaguely, and it fascinates me when I think how he came to the instrument to test the space-time curvature, like an eclipse. And if you take a sheet of paper and you put holes in it, and then you cover that, you would still see the stars, right? So now if we put many holes, those are the stars, and then the sun, a big hole for the sun. And the instrument was, well, we measure the stars when there's no eclipse, right? We know. But then when there's an eclipse, if the stars have moved, then we know that gravity shifts because of sun, right? I think I'm saying so gravity and space. So again, like I said, I'm not a physicist, but I think the physicists, they know what I'm talking about. So now there is some and two factors that you can't separate them.
Yeah.
I'm talking when I said sun, that's the gravity coming from the sun, and then it would shift the space, right? The
Yeah.
distance between these stars. So now it's the same thing. Time is there. We know time is not gonna. We have perfect measurement for time, but context, we don't have measurement for context, and this is a very, very fundamental problem. But if we can address that problem in the privacy domain, we would be able to quantify our personal data in a much easier way.
Totally.
And because personal data is dependent on those two main factors, context and time. Context, time.
I think, so I think one way to do this might be to classify the data according to the sensitivity. So, for example, your blood group, let's say, might be a highly sensitive information, all right, or any health data. So, like classification might help a bit the way I see it. Again, I'm still I'm not really sure, but it just gives me at the very least, it definitely helps the industry to classify the different data, and if you're using the kind of data that you're not allowed to use, at least it will flag it, right? So don't use it, or else you'll be fined. It's not complying with GDPR or the local privacy laws. So yeah. I want to ask you, you did mention about privacy as a currency. So, again, it's a two-part question. What do you mean by privacy as a currency, and how do regulations such as GDPR impact the concept of privacy as a currency?
I'll use salt as an example.
Lovely.
I think I've used this metaphor several times before, and I would like to use that to convey my perspective on privacy as a currency. Salt was early in the days was not accessible to anyone, humans.
Yep.
And then it was accessible to everyone, right? And it was accessible to everyone, that it was free commodity. Everyone would use it. It was good. And then in history, salt became the currency. Money
it did.
was salt, right? So if you want to exchange something, you actually give, I think, a piece of salt to exchange something else. This is what is happening today with personal data. It's accessible to all these organizations for the past 20 years or so. Now, personal data is becoming that, forming its own or itself as a currency. The more value is dragging back to that data. So then we would be able, if we think about salt and how many years, it might be very different now. We're moving fast toward the value of data and privacy. So one day it will be clear to people that, yes, now we are using our privacy to exchange digital products, maybe even physical products, until it becomes a main form of currency. That is my perspective on privacy as the future currency. But salt became very cheap now, right? So think also about that personal data will find that peak in its life, and then it slowly goes back to a normal commodity exchange, a stable rate, right? So, and then salt now is known, the rate, because now you need salt in everything, right? To eat, to cook, construction, you need salt is life.
Yeah.
Personal data is also life for humans.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
it will still remain in the future as a necessary thing we use to actually live. After it gets to that most valuable point in time, which is when it becomes a currency. We are not there yet, but I believe that we will be there very soon.
It sounds very scary to me because think about it. The part of the reason why salt became very cheap was because of the high supply, right? So the demand was high, obviously, but the supply is also very high. So the simple economics, the price went down. But if the same happens with private data, it like the way I see it, there are two ways to see it. Um, multiple organizations were providing innovative solutions to protect your identity, protect your private data, so that this eventually companies will be incentivized to have to use privacy as an innovation tool. That's the positive side, but the more negative side might be if you truly your currency, privacy is your currency, then data brokerage, it might go wild and it could be used terribly to and it might harm you because again if your privacy could be sold and it was sold, it is sold, data brokers are out there, so it's very scary and exciting to look at this perspective.
Well, you're right, but I also see the positive side, right? So the positive side here is, well, your data is already being exchanged for years now. So we know that we screwed up. Now, though, we are fixing that problem. Now you see solutions that help you delete your data from the past. So now, what are those solutions? Eventually, like I said in the beginning, we will see more of a bi-directional arrow between individuals and organizations when it comes to their personal data. Now, they could actually use their personal data as a means of exchange once we fix, right? So brokerage will be there, but will be more regulated. There will be clear rules, just like we buy products or we buy digital services today. We have clear rules. Look, you need to pay $19.99 to subscribe to this service. In the future, imagine something like that. You need to provide this much about yourself to be able to use this service. Otherwise, you could use the old cash. You could use coins, right? No one uses coins today. You have to envision this in a very long-term, broad perspective to understand how personal data will be the currency of the future. And I have no doubt about that.
Wow. I guess I need to ask you.
I'm sorry to scare you.
It is scary. It is very scary. More because I guess mostly because I don't know enough about it and I don't know how it's going to turn out. Which brings me to my last question: what do you think this industry, tech industry intertwined with privacy, is going to look like in the next 2 years, next 5 years, and the next 10 years?
The privacy industry. I can imagine more and more startups in the next 5 years. We already saw a surge in the number of startups in the past, especially past 5 years, even three. There are companies that their revenues reach to billions in a matter of 3-4 years. So that pattern will continue in the next 5 years and the next 10 years until this market matures. When the market is saturated with privacy, just like tech industries is saturated, there's always tech companies that will help you develop an application. And then we see different forms. You go to, you see different service providers like content management systems, right? WordPress and the alike came in the past, let's say 15 years or so. But before that, you had to go to an IT service provider to develop actually bespoke, or they give you something that they have and they customize it for you. But then we saw different forms of these applications, and then we saw mobile applications with different platforms. So the different infrastructure. Let's say the infrastructure is necessary to kind of predict what will happen in the future. So in the privacy domain, the infrastructure is now being formed, like understanding classification, understanding data flows very well from the planning, analysis, design, and so the infrastructure is now being formed in the privacy domain, right? This is in relation to that currency we're predicting. Now the infrastructure is being formed with these cookie banners, and then you see some crisp classification systems that help organizations and individuals classify their data immediately. And with AI, that would be much easier. And then in the future, we will have the infrastructure ready for us to give quantitative numbers, right? We associate numbers with these personal data much easier than we can do now. Today, it's very hard. But in the future, given the next 5 years in the privacy industry, seeing more and more startups, and then in 10 years, we will see maybe a sophisticated level of privacy applications that we cannot even imagine today. And by then we will know that, like just we know with social media, after from 2003 or so, early 2000s until 2010, 15, we realize, holy shit, there is a social media world out there, right? And if you're not part of it, you are in that digital divide that we have today. Same thing with privacy. So those who start learning these fundamental privacy practices, they will have an advantage in the future in the tech industry.
Yeah, totally agree. As someone earlier said, I remember them saying that there's always, in every industry, there's always a first comer's advantage. And if you could grab onto the low-hanging fruits first, and use it the right way, the moral and ethical way, in accordance to the market, you can become very rich, the right way. And it's very interesting to see how this industry will turn out for all our edification. I totally agree. So thank you so much, Tawfiq, for coming here and sharing insights with me and my audience.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Alvin. It was a pleasure.
I would love to come back and chat to you with on the same topic and on when in the near future. And Hopefully, you will have had published way more research papers on the topics and way more new things to educate me and my audience.
Absolutely, anytime would be my pleasure. I'm here in Barcelona at IESE Business School, and it's a lovely city. Please, anytime you visit here, let me know, and I would love to talk with you.
I appreciate the invitation. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Tawfiq with us. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.